Welcome back, everyone, to our latest episode of SCROTUS. We're joined again with Colin.
Hello.
Hello, sir. So we're going to jump straight into this because this case has quite a bit of information that I want to get through. But to sort of give you a rundown of what the case is, so it's United States versus Rahimi, and this is a Second Amendment case, so
Ooh,
gun rights.
you've piqued
It's
my interest.
it's probably going to spark some conversation, so we'll
Might not
get into
spark
that.
joy, but it will definitely spark something.
Yes, no, it's not going to spark joy. I'm going to go ahead and also tease that this is the exact wrong case that we wanted. You know, as people, I shouldn't say we. I, as a Second Amendment not even connoisseur lover, right? I
Yeah.
respect and appreciate the Second Amendment as
Two-way
someone.
respectors. Yes.
Okay, so as people in that camp,
Yeah.
this is the wrong case that we wanted to go to the Supreme Court. I'll say that. The case centers around the question of if a law banning someone from with a restraining order from owning a firearm, is that an actual violation of their Second Amendment right? So I'll get directly into the facts here. And that question will obviously become more apparent as to how important that is. So there's a U.S. statute, 18 U.S.C. 922. This is a law that gives stipulations on who may own firearms in the United States. This is when you hear people say, as a felon, you can't own a firearm, things like that. This is the law that says that. And it has quite a few other stipulations in the law as well. So one of those such stipulations, for example, is someone who's been adjudicated as, quote, and I'm quoting from the law here, as a mental defective. Also, someone who's been dishonorably discharged from the U.S. Armed Forces. And as I said before, someone who committed a felony. There's also a stipulation about restraining orders. So this is the part that is pertinent to this case. And I'm going to quote the law, so bear with me 1 second. So it reads in part, quote, "It shall be unlawful for any person who is subject to a court order that restrains such person from harassing, stalking, or threatening an intimate partner of such person or child, of such intimate partner or person, or engaging in other conduct that would place an intimate partner in reasonable fear of bodily injury to the partner or child." Basically, restraining order, right? So if a person has a restraining order and is thought to be a danger to someone else, they cannot own a firearm. I think that's probably a realistic law, right? We can take a second and get an aside on that. What do you think about that,
Oh,
Colin?
it's all about application, man. The law is all about application, as you would
Okay,
probably agree with. Yeah, yeah. It's. I think you've said as much, perhaps on one of the earlier episodes. I remember before I latched on here. Yeah, it's all about application.
it
That
is.
sounds great on paper, but I'm certain there's going to be an application that's going to hit me in about 2 seconds here when you keep explaining. That's going to go, oh, yeah,
Well, that is the unfortunate part because this particular man, Mr. Rahimi, is not such a person that we would want to take up for. So, Zaki Rahimi of Texas was under a restraining order from the mother of his child, so his baby mama, and his ex-girlfriend after he allegedly assaulted her. And I use allegedly because the case facts also use the word allegedly, but it was pretty much certain that he assaulted his baby mama. So there was a restraining order for a reason. The restraining order expressly prohibited him from possessing a firearm, which is in conjunction with the law that I just quoted previously.
right.
Rahimi broke that law when he had a pistol and an automatic rifle in his home. And between the months of December 2020 and January 2021, he was involved in 5 shootings. I will not list all 5 of them, but I'll give you a taste of what he did.
Okay.
Mr. Rahimi opened fire on a man who insulted him after doing a drug deal. He shot several shots into the air after his credit card was declined when trying to purchase a hamburger. And he was involved
I
in,
shouldn't laugh, but that's fucking hilarious.
and he shot at, excuse me, several people involved in like some road rage incidents.
May I make a may I just make a rhetorical point here?
Sure, sure.
He is in Texas
Yes.
and he did not get shot back is surprising to me. Because all the stories I hear from Texas are like crazy man tries thing and is quickly dealt with
Right, right.
by a responsible gun owner. I'm surprised. I think he's actually lucky that something didn't happen to him, that he's able
You're
to
absolutely
press this
correct.
case. I think it's like, you're lucky, dude.
You're
Um,
absolutely correct.
yeah.
Especially in these last two. So,
Discharging, even just discharging a firearm because for any reason other than self-defense or defense of another person's life, if something happens to you and because you were just, I got angry in my credit, I don't care. Like, I just don't care.
right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so several road rage incidents
That too. Yeah.
ended him shooting at the other cars and drivers. And again, as you said, he did not get shot back at. So
Surprising.
due to at least one of these, if not several of these instances, the police investigated him and had a search warrant to search his home because he was identified as a suspect in these possible shootings. And so obviously when they executed the search warrant, they walked into his house and found what he was not supposed to have, which were the two guns that I mentioned previously. Obviously he was arrested.
So wait, so what you're telling me? So I'm just curious. Does
Yes.
the information of the case tell anything about whether he had he purchased these guns already, or were they not legally purchased, or how did he get? Is there any information about that?
I do not have information on
That's
that.
okay. That's fine. I'm just curious. That's something that always comes to my mind because
But I believe so. Even if he had owned the firearms before the restraining order was put in place,
it wouldn't have made a difference.
right?
I know, but I just ask more for statistical reasons, if you know what I mean.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Mr. Rahimi argued in the District Court of Texas that part of the law that I again read earlier is unconstitutional and violated his Second Amendment right.
To
The
to shoot because his card was declined.
no. To own a
What?
firearm because of the restraining order.
Okay.
Right. So to own he's claiming that the law barring him from owning a firearm because he has a restraining order against him, excuse me, is unconstitutional and a violation of his Second Amendment right. So the court he argued in cited a Fifth Circuit precedent, and I looked up this precedent, and it basically says the exact same thing that he's saying, but going against him. So there was a precedent in the Fifth Circuit that said, no, this part of the law, even if you have a restraining order, it's constitutional for us to say that you can't have a firearm. So that had already been answered by a previous case. And interestingly enough, so Rahimi pled guilty in that district court after the opposing counsel brought up this Fifth Circuit precedent.
Pled guilty to what?
So he pled guilty to owning firearms that he should not have owned against illegally. Yeah.
Dumb. I mean,
So
this person is not intelligent at
yes,
all.
you're correct.
We're dealing with, yeah.
After he pled guilty,
I mean, this is idiocy. Even you're not even a competent criminal. I mean, I guess maybe I don't even know. I want to say thankfully. I mean, at least he can't shoot word shit because he didn't hit anybody.
right.
So I guess I don't even. Yeah, keep going. I don't even know what my response should be from this. Like, I guess I'm glad nobody got injured, but this guy is just.
No, you're getting to the point of this is not the case we wanted to go to.
We
the
don't want
Supreme
this.
Court
Yeah, we don't want this. Yeah.
So yeah, Rahimi pled guilty in that district court, but he then turned around and appealed, which you can do. So the case went to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is again where I said that precedent that I mentioned earlier. That's exactly where it came from.
That's hilarious in a way.
He had to go to the Fifth Circuit. The Fifth Circuit agreed with the district court's ruling and said, no, the law is constitutional. You are not allowed to have a firearm because you have the restraining order. Now here comes the really interesting part. That Fifth Circuit ruling was decided on June 8th, 2022. However, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a decision on June 23rd, so a couple of weeks later, on a case called New York Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, which changed everything. So the case from the Supreme Court in June 2022, this New York Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, it was a case in which New York had issued a law about gun ownership that said basically anyone who wants to apply for a gun permit has to prove that they need one.
I remember, reading something about that one. Okay, that one,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So New York New York State passed a law saying if you want to apply for a concealed carry permit, you have to prove that you
New
are in
York,
need
New
of
York
one.
hates people. It's pretty
And
clear.
the someone by the name of Bruin, this party sued, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, no, you can't pass a law that says that. The Second
No,
Amendment's very clear.
and what I mean by that is people from New York are great, like both the city and the state. It's this like the city and state. The city of New York hates you, and the state hates you too. Like the government of everything in New York, it just hates you.
Right.
And that's coming from somebody who lives, in the Democratic Republic of Chaz Chop, like if which also hates you. But even for me, this strikes me as like New York. I'm like, oh, could be worse. Could be in New York, which is like, it's just different flavors of shit sandwich at that point. But particularly when it comes to Second Amendment stuff, there is something about, and it's not like Washington's great. It's not, believe me. But there's something. New York is really atrocious when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, luckily this Bruin case came out in the Second Amendment.
Sorry,
State.
I should note too that don't worry though, because it's a really safe place to be, particularly New York City. It's very safe. Those laws are working and keeping everyone very safe. Continue.
Of
Of
course.
course. The law works. Everyone follows it. Yeah, keep going. Nobody ever breaks a law, right? It just automatically solves the problem. Keep going.
Yeah. So basically this Bruin case, as I said, changed how we view laws governing the Second Amendment. So this law that I quoted earlier, the one that Mr. Rahimi lost to, it kind of puts it into question, right? Is this law actually unconstitutional? So Clarence Thomas wrote in the decision about New York Rifle Pistol Association versus Bruin, quote, when the Second Amendment's plain text covers an individual's conduct, here, the right to bear arms, the Constitution presumptively protects that conduct. The government must then justify its regulation by demonstrating that it is consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation.
Based, Thomas, as always.
Only then may a court conclude that the individual's conduct falls outside the Second Amendment's unqualified command.
I know we keep saying this on the show, but why does it have to be like the few of like the last austere gentlemen scholars who keep like the shreds of our civilization together? We're like, how old is Thomas now? Is he in his 70s?
Oh gosh, I'm really not sure.
I know he's spry enough to tour the world, to tour the country in his RV with his wife every summer, which is so cute and cool. But like great. I overall really love him, but this is I know it's a meta comment that needs to be repeated. The country's like held together by like the last few like decent people who actually give a shit. It's insane. This is not a democracy, by the way. Is also my point. It's like this is not anything like that. This is something else. So that
Clarence Thomas is a wise man and a very eloquent writer, if I may say.
I also think he has the distinct quality, which I wish I possessed, of literally not giving a fuck.
Yeah.
I think he just is like, I don't care.
I think that comes with age.
I think it probably comes. I'm not an expert on his career, but the little bit I've read, I'm like, I think he's always just kind of never given a fuck, which is, I wish I could give even less of a fuck, right? Like he clearly doesn't care in the best of ways. Like, very much willing to dissent and or maintain depending or uphold depending on what anyhow, keep going.
So this new precedent that I just quoted from the Supreme Court decision, Clarence Thomas, it gave obviously a new relaxed view on the right to own and possess firearms. that exact quote that I just read from Thomas is very clear in that ruling.
Makes me
So
happy.
the Fifth Circuit actually reopened Mr. Rahimi's case.
That doesn't make me happy for reasons that I'll get into when you're done.
So they reopened his case, giving him a new panel of judges on the Fifth Circuit to rehear the arguments with considering the new precedent from Bruin. The court then accepted Rahimi's argument, and now we find ourselves at the Supreme Court trying to answer this question.
I
So the two arguments here, just really quickly.
Yeah.
So the United States is arguing it knows its audience, right? So we have a mostly conservative court, and a conservative judicial philosophy follows a tenet called originalism. So I've spoken about this on other podcasts, but just to give you a overview, conservative judicial philosophy is originalism. Basically, it's what does the text of the Constitution actually say? What does the text of the law actually say, right? And how can we interpret that based on the original meaning of when that person or those people wrote the laws, right? Or the Constitution. They follow not just text, but also what we call history and tradition. So it's this idea of text, history, and tradition. So the Solicitor General, who was arguing on behalf of the United States, obviously knew her audience, so she conducted her argument accordingly. So when the Second Amendment does not specifically define who can and cannot own a gun, we have history and tradition of disarming what she said are dangerous people. So she gave an example. Revolutionary War law disarmed loyalists who were perceived as a danger due to their refusal to pledge allegiance to the new republic. Some of these laws that she is referring to used language like, quote, law-abiding and responsible citizens. Also, historic scholars claim that records from the discussion of the drafting of the Constitution say that when they were discussing the Second Amendment specifically, that some of the drafters argued that we should include the word peaceably when it comes to owning a gun. So people should be allowed to own guns who would own them peaceably, if that sort of makes sense.
No, because it's a preposterous argument, but keep going.
Well, which is probably why they didn't put it in there. But again,
this is approaching some, yeah. Anyhow, keep going.
But that was the United States argument based on text, history, and tradition. Mr. Rahimi argued that the Second Amendment, on its face, does not stipulate what type of citizen can possess a firearm, right? It gives that right to all citizens blanketly. There's no textual indication in the Constitution to suggest that the Second Amendment is any different from any other right, like freedom of speech, right? You can't select, you have freedom of speech because you have not committed a felony, but you don't because you did. Basically it's saying there's no law, right, stipulating who's allowed to have free speech, who's not. And that right shouldn't be and can't be taken away just because you've committed some action. That was his defense. He also rejects the Revolutionary War example that I just cited from the United States, saying that those laws targeting loyalists were not part of history because they weren't citizens, right? So those were loyalists. Those were people who didn't want to become American citizens. Therefore, the Second Amendment wouldn't have applied to them in the first place. So it was a bad example in his eyes.
I'm not trying to give him credit because I'm certain this is a lawyer working on his behalf. I don't think this is him. I think I say this is probably not him. That sounds like somebody with a college degree and like a advanced legal degree making that kind of argument. I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's him. Just gonna guess.
Right.
Yeah. The same guy who fires off rounds inside a store because his card was declined is probably not making these arguments. I'm just going to say.
Yes. And he also rejects the last part of their argument about the debate and discussion of the Second Amendment drafting, saying clearly they didn't include that extra word of peaceably in the final draft of the document for a reason. So we can't assume that that's what they meant or that's what they wanted to say, right? It's not in the document, so we can't use it.
Yeah.
So those are the two arguments. Basically,
They're both
as I,
awful.
as I said before, this is the wrong case
They're both awful
to
arguments.
bring this question to the court, right?
I think it's hilarious to me that the reason he can't possess a firearm is because of the restraining order and not the fact that he shoots guns at people who are not attacking him or his property.
Right. And I
He's
want
not
to make
defending
some,
life or property.
right.
This is a thing. I know everyone knows this, but I'm just going to say this. You are responsible for every single round that leaves a firearm under your control.
Yeah.
Not your possession, not your ownership, your control. If you're at a range and you're shooting, it doesn't matter whether you've rented the gun from the range or not. It doesn't matter whether you're in whether you're in a life or death situation. God forbid, nobody wants that. Whether you're hunting, or you're doing target practice or something like that, you are responsible for every single fucking round that leaves the gun. No exceptions. You are responsible legally, morally, ethically. That is the first thing you learn when you are a responsible gun owner. I'm
Yes.
just gonna say, like you say, he's not our guy. He is so not our
Yes.
guy. This guy
Yes.
does not give a shit whether little Jimmy playing in the yard next door or across the street gets killed because you decided it was a good idea when not in direct, not in, you weren't going to, your person or your property was not in under threat to just shoot a gun at somebody. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
it's
This is,
crazy to me that maybe there wasn't enough evidence to convict him, right? On those other instances, fine. Maybe it's all just like hearsay or whatever, or it's hard to prove. But that is being left aside. And what is being brought up is weird, like the stipulation, the letter. And I get it. It's the law, right? Like that's how the law works. It's like by definition autistic in this way. But that's crazy to me
yeah.
because I mean, and it's also, I'm going to make a guess. I've guessed that this gentleman does not have an advanced legal degree and is not doing his own defense. That's probably pretty safe. I'm going to make
Yes.
a guess that he is not, does not regularly, he regularly shoots, but not at a range, and does not stay up. He regularly practices live round fire in like public. It seems like, but I would
Yeah.
make an argument that he does not take gun ownership seriously
Correct.
in the sense that he obviously doesn't care, which is also to me implies some sort of sociopathic tendencies. Also, he clearly doesn't care, as in he doesn't know enough about how guns work, and he doesn't train enough with them. I bet you $5,000 right now that that's the case, and I would get five. I don't. Nobody would take that bet, right?
No, probably not.
But
I know.
and so what? And I so when I keep saying no, he's so to reference Timeline Earth, he's so not our guy. He's not, because he's making the rest of us look like insane assholes because he happens to be an insane asshole. But it's insane to me that they're not addressing any of the other actual firearm things he's doing. It's this weird stipulation about the structure of how the one thing is worded. It's like,
So this,
okay,
yes.
the
No,
bigger issue is his credit card is declined and he shoots a gun.
this is
That's the
exactly,
issue to me.
but this is exactly the problem here because
Yeah.
a lot of people don't know this. I referenced this in a previous episode, but I'm going to kind of come out and say it in this one because you're right. It is very pertinent here. The Supreme Court answers questions, right?
I get it. I get it.
Right.
I
So,
get it. I'm just saying, as a citizen of this country who values our Bill of Rights, I would hate to see one of, and perhaps might be the actual most important right that we have, in my opinion, IMO, as the kids say, because of some weird flim flam thing where now you get people who clearly do not like the Second Amendment arguing based from an originalist perspective. And it's like, this is a co-opting of that framework to try
right.
to, that's what I worry about. Is like, oh, this is some sort of like, you know what I mean? Like this is,
But,
lawyers do this shit all the time.
but, so guess my point is the Supreme Court justices should not be, I'm not going to say they aren't because they're citizens too. They use their brains. They shouldn't be taking the facts in the case into account when answering the question in front of them. So the facts of this case, the fact that this man is horrible, the fact that this man is not a responsible gun
Yep.
owner, is not really
No,
at
and
question here.
and I don't want it to be. Let me make that clear. I don't want it to be. I want the Second Amendment to be upheld. I also simultaneously want this dude completely
Right.
severely impacted for his legally impacted for his irresponsible behavior with the gun, not because of the gun, but what he does with it. That's what I want. And I
Right.
think that is, I understand that that's beyond the purview of what the court's doing. I get that.
Yeah, it's the lower courts. It's the lower
Right.
courts that adjudicate facts of a
My
case.
point is, this is like an ultimate failure of the system, and it's actually eroding the Second Amendment in the process. Is sort of, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It's putting the Second Amendment in danger because of this kind of general societal degeneracy is what I'm trying to say. Like this is a cultural issue. My opinion, not Mitch's, my opinion. This is a cultural issue being played out, and because our culture refuses to uphold any of the things we used to really uphold, it's now being pushed to a Supreme Court case.
But this is
Crazy.
exactly why the left gets so crazy and angry when the court does actually make a decision that is quote unquote hyper conservative, and that's because they don't care about the facts, right?
But
The
I'll say it
left,
again. I like that, like, for example, Thomas's opinion. I like that opinion on this particular case. This person should not be anywhere near, not just a gun, the general public should not be allowed with normal people. My opinion. This behavior is insane.
right?
Insane
So
behavior.
it's looking like legal scholars are saying that it's looking like Rahimi will lose, which means it's going to be potentially make some Second Amendment people angry.
Yeah,
But I can't say that I disagree with that ruling, because I don't think someone who has a restraining order should be able to own a gun. Now that opens another question.
Except that getting a restraining, what does a restraining order mean?
Exactly.
Right? It means that a judge somewhere decided that the evidence was is in a favor of giving you one. There's no court. Not really. There's no jury, whether a jury of your peers is even worth anything in these days. There's none of that. It's just like judges can give and do give these things very readily, and I'm in many cases quite justifiably.
So maybe that's something that should be fixed. But
for me, that's the problem with this is
yes.
that but it's a shame that this could become an either or situation, and that's just such a shame to me. And because like constitutionalists, originalists, I have a lot of respect for those people, a lot of common ground with those people, but they have to realize, and I've made this point before, so I'll make it again. Probably why you bring me on to be that guy who always says the one thing. The Constitution is great, and it only works if you've maintained the culture that produced it. We have not. And so what you get is things like this, where people who are clearly trying to use it to do horrible things to people will say, but don't you believe in the Second Amendment? But don't you believe in the blah, blah, blah? The Constitution says, it's like, yes, I do. You clearly are misusing this for your own nefarious ends. And so then they put you in a bind where you have to choose between defending the Constitution, which you like, and trying to curtail behavior which you hate. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So
and this is on purpose. This is a legal strategy, I think, that progressives and leftists are using.
We could have a decision that affects the Second Amendment. But again, I think we get back to the question of that really shouldn't matter on this end. It matters more on the restraining order end, right?
Right.
Making it a higher burden of proof to.
I'm also not against restraining orders. I'll say that I'm also not against restraining orders. My point is that in heated, intimate relationship squabbles, any manner of thing can be claimed by both parties simultaneously. Like it's so chaotic when people get that emotionally upset that.
And you can have a very leftist activist judge who will look at a woman saying that this man is threatening me or whatever,
or vice versa.
Right. Yeah. But
you can have, there's malicious men out there. I mean, it's not as there's statistical tendencies, but I mean, it can and does affect people of both genders.
But someone who's completely making up, things against someone else, and an activist judge who's like, oh, well, I'm going to believe you in this case and give you a restraining order against this
Happens a lot.
person.
That kind of stuff happens a lot.
And so by that definition, then that person loses their Second Amendment right.
Yeah, and that's a precedent setting that's what freaks me out too. Maybe even that, yeah, that for me, that's one of the bigger issues here. Is you're like, whoa.
So there's one piece of solace here, because last term, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, of all people, she's not my favorite person, obviously, but she wrote something in one of her opinions that I really hope whoever writes this opinion adopts. She wrote, quote, "Other cases presenting different allegations and different records may lead to different conclusions." So she literally wrote in one of her opinions, I'm going to say make this opinion, but in other cases that have different facts, you might want to take another opinion, right? So she's basically doing exactly what she shouldn't be doing, which is considering the facts of a case, which is not, again, what the Supreme Court does.
But it's not about, I think between the two of us, you're the theorist and I'm the realist when it comes to this, but that's not what actually happens, right?
Right.
I will say this. So you know a lot more about this than I do. He reiterate a point I said earlier. Whether or not, however he acquired the firearms, he was not allowed to have them.
Mm-hmm.
Did that stop him from engaging in dangerous behavior with said firearms?
Clearly not.
So I'll leave it with that.
Are you suggesting that people who break the law can still get and own and use recklessly firearms?
I guess, because it's in this case with these facts, yes. No, clearly, yeah. So we're arguing about restricting rights, not just for this person, but for citizens of this country. When there's this inherent part of every legal system throughout human history has always had this problem. Laws only appear when people have already broken them, and they do not stop. The law does not stop people from breaking the law. It prescribes what is allowed and not allowed, and it prescribes penalties. It does not.
Yeah.
The law does not. That's my opinion, at least. Now, penalties to the law can change human behavior, but it doesn't really stop evil like you think it does. Not really.
I'm going to give one more piece of color to this, and we'll close it out.
All right.
Just an interesting fact that I learned this past week. That Fifth Circuit judge who wrote the opinion siding with Rahimi, after the Bruin case precedent set a new precedent, and they reevaluated the case. The Fifth Circuit judge who wrote the opinion for that, he has already cited his own precedent in another case using this kind of Rahimi setup, knowing that it would probably be struck down by the Supreme Court any moment now.
Balls. That's some real
right.
Balls there. Yeah.
Yes. So he's already citing a very new precedent in another case, knowing that it's going to get struck down.
Wow. Respect, I guess, in some ways. It's just, wow. There's the drip, I guess, as the kids say. That's some drip. Yeah.
So yeah, Fifth Circuit is known as probably one of the most, as the kids say, based circuit appeal courts.
Yes, it's clear that we are no longer the kids, and that's okay. We wish them the best. Do better. Be better than us. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to reading the opinion on this one. So we'll see how.
Yeah, we should revisit this one if you want.
We have to. We have
bring
to
me back on.
When the opinion comes out, that'll probably be in the new year. So.
Do not if you have weapons, own them legally, follow all said laws, use them responsibly. You are responsible for every bullet that leaves every single gun that you are in control of. I will say that right now. So,
amen.
This is the first thing you learn. So,
yeah. And I'm sure this is not the only Second Amendment case that we will talk about in the long, arduous to come history of this show. So
Yeah, and I will say that on every single one because it's important and it needs to be said. So yeah,
yes,
yeah.
but yeah, case dismissed.